Hello viewers, and may the 4th be with you! Believe it or not, it is actually Star Wars Day. So if you are a fellow Star Wars fan, happy Star Wars Day. Meanwhile, as strange as it is, I am going to be reading the next chapter of Harry Potter. Because who doesn't love Harry? Okay, Muggles and Squips don't like Harry Potter, but they are seriously missing out. Anyway, let's get started because I'm excited to show you the big surprise I have in mind. Chapter 2, Aunt Marge's Big Mistake. And they do mean big. Harry went down to breakfast the next morning to find 3 Dursleys already sitting around the kitchen table. They were watching a brand new television, a welcome home for the summer present for Dudley, who had been complaining loudly about the long walk between the fridge and the television in the living room. Dudley had spent most of the summer in the kitchen, his piggy little eyes fixed on the screen, and his 5 chins wobbling as he ate continually. I don't think it's possible to have 5 chins, but I guess that shows his trembling. Harry sat down between Dudley and Uncle Vernon, a large beefy man with very little neck and a lot of mustache. Far from wishing Harry a happy birthday, none of the Dursleys made any sign that they had noticed Harry enter the room. But Harry was far used to this care. He helped himself to a piece of toast, then looked up at the reporter on the television, who was halfway through a report on an escaped convict. The public is warned that Black is armed and extremely dangerous. A special hotline has been set up, and any signing of Black should be reported immediately. No need to tell us he's no good, snorted Uncle Vernon, staring at the top of his newspaper at the prisoner. Look at the state of him, the filthy layabout. Look at his hair. He shot a nasty look sideways at Harry, whose untidy hair had always been a source of great annoyance to Uncle Vernon. Compared to the man on television, however, whose gaunt face was surrounded by a matted, elbow-length tangle, Harry felt very well-groomed indeed. For what it's worth, I don't like tats in my long and thick hair either. How funny, though, that Harry and I both have our hair a little untidy, though. The reporter had reappeared. The Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries will announce today. Right on, barked Uncle Vernon, staring furiously at the reporter. You didn't tell us where that maniac escaped from. What use is that? Lunatic could be coming up the street right now. Aunt Petunia, who was moany and horse-faced, whipped around and peered intently out of the kitchen window. Harry knew Aunt Petunia would simply love to be the one to call the hotline number. She was the nosiest woman in the world and spent most of her life spying on the boring, law-abiding neighbors. When will they learn? Said Uncle Vernon, pounding the table with his large purple fist. That arresting's the only way to deal with these people. Very true, said Aunt Petunia, who was still squinting into the next door's runner beams. Uncle Vernon drained his teacup, glanced at his watch. I'm not wearing one, but it's just a thing people do. And added, I better be off in a minute, Petunia. Marge's train gets in at 10. Harry, whose thoughts had been upstairs with the broomstick servicing kit, was brought back to earth with an unpleasant bump. Aunt Marge, he blurted out. She's not coming here, is she? Aunt Marge was Uncle Vernon's sister. Although she was not a blood relative of Harry's, whose mother had been Aunt Petunia's sister, he had been forced to call her Aunt all his life. Okay, let's see. Lily and Petunia are sisters. Vernon's Lily's sister-in-law. Aunt Marge is Vernon's sister, so... Technically, Aunt would be the genealogical name. Because like I was figuring out, Lily and Petunia are sisters, so therefore Petunia is Harry's aunt. Petunia is married to Vernon, who is Lily's sister-in-law, or brother-in-law, sorry. And because Marge is Dursley, or Vernon's sister, that makes Marge Lily's sister-in-law too. So technically, aunt would be the genealogical term of address. But yeah, I don't like it when people force other people to call people after people what they're supposed, what they're I guess what I'm saying or trying to say more rather, I don't like it when people force people to do things. I've gone through my fair share of that in a way or two. It's not pretty. Anyways, Aunt Marge lived in the country in a large house with a large garden where she bred bulldogs. I wonder if they're French or English. I'm guessing English though. And yes, this is going to be the only time you hear me refer British as English to distinct from the language. Just thought I'd clarify. She didn't often stay at Pivet Drive because she couldn't bear to leave her precious dogs, but each of her visits stood out horribly vividly in Harry's mind. At Dudley's 5th birthday party, Aunt Marge had whacked Harry around the shins with her walking stick to stop him from beating Dudley at musical statues. Okay, to explain, this game is like musical chairs, but instead of going around chairs, it's like you dance to the music, and then when the music stops, you do that. Stay still as possible. You're welcome. A few years later, she had turned up at Christmas with a computerized robot for Dudley and a box of dog biscuits for Harry. The Dursleys don't even own a dog. Why would they need dog biscuits? I mean, the only logical explanation I have to my earlier question is that if she comes up again and she brings one of her dogs along. I mean, I don't know. But either way, that is not a good present to give to Harry. On her last visit the year before Harry started at Hogwarts, Harry had accidentally trodden off on the tail of her favorite dog. Ripper had chased Harry out into the garden and up a tree, and Aunt Marge had refused to call him off until past midnight. The memory of this incident still brought tears of laughter to Dudley's eyes. Marge will be here for a week, Uncle Vernon snarled. And while we're on the subject, he pointed a fat finger threateningly at Harry. We need to get a few things straight before I go and collect her. Dudley smirked and withdrew his gaze from the television, watching Harry being bullied by Uncle Vernon was Dudley's favorite form of entertainment. Now, just know, it is not a good thing to be bullied, if I may speak from experience. And to have the feeling of watching others get bullied, well, it'll make you feel sorry for the bully, first off. And second off, it's just not a good thing to do. If you see someone bullying someone else, I suggest you tell a trusted adult. Unfortunately, in my tenure of being bullied, I never had the courage to speak up for myself, because a lot of the time, those who are bullied, like I have been, have a little bit of trauma with this, and, well, the psychological aspect of trauma is basically that it gets not only locked in your memories, but it can make things hard, like defending yourself, to do. I guess that's one of the reasons why I like doing art outside of reading so much. It gives me the freedom to be expressive and who I truly am. So let's continue anyways. I just thought I'd branch out a little bit on that little bit heavy topic. First guy, growled Uncle Vernon. You keep a civil tongue in your head when you're talking to Marge. All right, said Harry bitterly. If she does when she's talking to me. Secondly, said Uncle Vernon, acting as though he had not heard Harry's reply. As Marge doesn't know anything about your abnormality, I don't want any funny stuff while she's here. You behave yourself, got me? I will if she does, said Harry through gritted teeth. And thirdly, said Uncle Vernon, his mean little eyes now slits in his great purple face. Might as well be a dried up prune. And yes, this is a little callback to when Hagrid bent the gun in Sorcerer's Stone and said, I'll dry up dog like a great prune. I just thought I'd do that slight callback. We've told Marge to attend St. Brutus' secure center for incurably criminal boys. Yeesh, based on the title of that school, sounds like a prison center. Or an asylum of sorts. What? Harry yelled. And you'll be sticking to that story, boy, or there'll be trouble, spat Uncle Vernon. Harry sat there, white-faced and furious, staring at Uncle Vernon, hardly able to believe it. Aunt Marge was coming for a week-long visit. It was the worst birthday present the Dursleys had ever given him, including that pair of Uncle Vernon's old socks. Well, Petunia, said Uncle Vernon, getting heavily to his feet. I'll be off to the station then. Want to come along for the ride, Duddles? No, said Dudley, whose attention had returned to the television now that Uncle Vernon had finished threatening Harry. Dudley's got to make himself smart for his auntie, said Aunt Petunia, smoothing Dudley's thick blonde hair. Mummy's bought him a lovely new bow tie. Okay, bow ties are fine. Don't get me wrong. But the thought of wearing Dudley wearing a bow tie is just... I'm sorry. No. Uncle Vernon clapped Dudley on his porky shoulder. I'm sorry. I'm just imagining Dudley with an actual pig shoulder of a pig. I'm sorry. See you in a bit then, he said, and he left the kitchen. Harry, who had been sitting in a kind of horrified trance, had a sudden idea. Abandoning his toast, R.I.P. toast. I like toast. He quickly got to his feet and followed Uncle Vernon to the front door. Uncle Vernon was pulling on his car coat. "I'm not taking you," he snarled and turned to see Harry watching him. "Like I wanted to come," said Harry coldly. "I want to ask you something." Uncle Vernon eyed him suspiciously. "Third years at home at my school are allowed to visit the village sometimes," said Harry. "So?" snapped Uncle Vernon, taking his car keys from a hook next to the door. "I need you to sign the permission form," said Harry in a rush. "And why would I do that?" sneered Uncle Vernon. "Well," said Harry, choosing his words carefully. "Smart move, and clever. It'll be hard work pretending to Aunt Marge that I go to that St. What's-its St. Rhodes' secure center for incurably criminal bullies," bellowed Uncle Vernon, and Harry was pleased to hear a definite note of panic in Uncle Vernon's voice. "Exactly," said Harry, looking calmly up to Uncle Vernon's large purple face. "It's a lot to remember. I'll have to make it sound convincing, won't I? What if I accidentally let something slip?" "You'll get the stuffing knocked out of you, won't you?" roared Uncle Vernon, advancing on Harry with his fist raised, but Harry stood his ground. I wish I stood my ground with my controller. It was hard. "Knocking the stuffing out of me won't make Aunt Marge forget what I could tell her," he said grimly. Uncle Vernon stopped, his fist still raised, his face an ugly puce. Huh? Yeah, that sounds right. "But if you sign my permission form," Harry went on quickly, "I swear I remember where I'm supposed to go to school, and I'll act like I'm normal and everything." Harry could tell Uncle Vernon was thinking it over, even if his teeth were bared and a vein was throbbing in his temple. "Right," he snapped finally. "I shall monitor your behavior carefully during Marge's visit. If, at the end of it, you toe the line and kept to the story, I'll sign your running form." He wheeled around, pulled open the front door, and slammed it so hard that one of the little panes of glass at the top fell out. Harry didn't return to the kitchen. He went back upstairs to his bedroom. If he was going to act like a real muggle, he better start now. Slowly and sadly, he gathered up all his presents and his birthday cards and hid them under the loose floorboard with his homework. Then he went to Hedwig's cage. Errol seemed to have recovered. He and Hedwig were both asleep, heads under their wings. Harry sighed, then poked them both awake. "Hedwig," he said gloomily, "you're going to have to clear off for a week. Go with Errol. Ron will look after you. I'll write him a note, explaining. Don't look at me like that." Hedwig's large amber eyes were reproachful. "It's not my fault. It's the only way I'll be allowed to visit Hogsmeade with Ron and Hermione." 10 minutes later, Errol and Hedwig, who had a note to Ron bound to her leg, soared out of the window and out of sight. Harry, now feeling thoroughly miserable, put the empty cage away inside the wardrobe. I can imagine how hard that must have been. I mean, I've been through something similar. When I was going to be with my controller, I would miss my cats a lot, and I feel bad for leaving them, so I know what that's like. But Harry didn't have long to brood. In next to no time, Aunt Petunia was shrieking up the stairs. I'm not going to even attempt. For Harry to come down and get ready to welcome their guests. "Do something about your hair!" Aunt Petunia snapped as he reached the hall. Harry couldn't see the point of trying to make his hair lie flat. Aunt Marge loved criticizing him, so the untidier he looked, the happier she would be. All too soon there was a crunch of gravel outside as Uncle Vernon's car pulled back into his driveway, then the plunk of the car doors and footsteps on the garden path. "Get the door!" Aunt Petunia hissed at Harry. The feeling of great gloom. Great gloom. I'm sorry. Great gloom in his stomach. Harry pulled the door open. On the threshold stood Aunt Marge. She was very like Uncle Vernon, large, beefy, and purple-faced. She even had a mustache, though not as bushy as his. On one hand she held an enormous suitcase, tucked under the other was an old and evil-tempered bulldog. "Where's my tatas?" roared Aunt Marge. "Where's my Neffy Pope?" Dudley came waddling down the hall, his blonde hair plastered flat to his head, a bow tie just visible under his many chins. Aunt Marge thrust the suitcase into Harry's stomach, knocking the wind out of him, and seized Dudley in a tight one-armed hug and planted a large kiss on his cheek. Yes, this is actually a custom they have there. Harry knew perfectly well that Dudley only put up with Aunt Marge's hugs because he was well paid for it, and sure enough, when they broke apart, Dudley had a crisp 20-pound note clenched in his fat fist. "Petunia!" shouted Aunt Marge, striding past Harry as though he was a hat stand. Aunt Marge and Petunia kissed, or rather Aunt Marge bumped her large jaw against Aunt Petunia's bony cheekbone. Uncle Vernon now came in, smiling jovially as he shut the door. "Tea, Marge," he said. "And what a Ripper take." "Ripper can have some tea out of my saucer," said Aunt Marge as they all trooped into the kitchen, leaving Harry alone in the hall with the suitcase. But Harry wasn't complaining. An excuse to not be with Aunt Marge was fine by him. So he began to heave the case upstairs into the spare bedroom, taking as long as he could. By the time he got back into the kitchen, Aunt Marge had been supplied with tea and fruitcake, and Ripper was laughing noisily in the corner. Harry saw Aunt Petunia wince slightly as specks of tea and drool flecked her clean floor. Aunt Petunia hated animals. Knowing her, she'd probably treat them like she does Harry. And that's a little sad because animal oppression is a crime no matter where you are. It's just sad. But I personally wouldn't mind having an animal in my home if they were trained and taught how to behave properly. Something tells me that if since Marge is similar to her brother, she doesn't treat her canines very well. And that's sad because when an animal has been oppressed, it can show in many different ways, just like us humans. So, yeah. "Who's looking after the other dogs, Marge?" Uncle Vernon asked. "Oh, I've got Colonel Fubster managing them," boomed Aunt Marge. "He's retired now. Good for him to have something to do. But I couldn't leave poor old Ripper. He pines if he's away from me." That's pretty much the statement of every pet owner. Trust me, I'm a fellow pet mom, so I would know. And don't worry, I do not do what Marge does. Herbert began to growl again as Harry sat down. This directed Aunt Marge's attention to Harry for the first time. "So," she barked. "Still here, are you?" "Yes," said Harry. "Don't you say yes in that ungrateful tone," Aunt Marge growled. "It's good of Vernon and Petunia to keep you. Wouldn't have done it myself. You'd have gone straight to an orphanage if you dumped on my doorstep." Harry was bursting to say that he'd rather live in an orphanage than with the Dursleys, but the thought of the Hogsmeade form stopped him. He forced his face into a painful smile. "Don't you smack at me!" boomed Aunt Marge. "I could see you haven't improved since I last saw you. I hope school would knock some manners into you." She took a large gulp of tea, wiped her mustache, and said, "Where is it that you send him again, Vernon?" "St. Rufus's," said Uncle Vernon promptly. "It's a first-rate institution for hopeless causes." "I see," said Aunt Marge. "Do they use the cane at St. Brutus's, boy?" She barked across the table. Uncle Vernon nodded courtly behind Aunt Marge's back. "Yes," said Harry, feeling he might as well do the thing properly. He added, "all the time." "Excellent," said Aunt Marge. "I won't have this namby-pamby, wishy-washy nonsense about not hitting people who deserve it. A good thrashing is what's needed in 99 cases out of 100. Have you been beaten often?" "Oh, yeah," said Harry. "Loads of times." Aunt Marge narrowed her eyes. "Okay, I get this is all a pretend situation, but when you think about it, that sentiment at from Harry just it's heartbreaking because in some ways, and it shows, of course, he actually has this it shows throughout the series in a way that this statement is actually not far from truth. "I still don't like the tone, boy," she said. "If you can speak of your beatings in that casual way, they clearly aren't hitting you hard enough. Petunia, I'd write if I were you. Make it clear that you approve of the use of extreme force in this boy's case." Perhaps Uncle Vernon was worried that Harry might forget their bargain. In any case, he changed the subject abruptly. "Had the news this morning, Marge? What about that escaped prisoner, eh?" As Aunt Marge started to make herself at home, Harry caught himself thinking almost wrongly of life of number 4 without her. Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia usually encouraged Harry to stay out of their way, which Harry was only too happy to do. Aunt Marge, on the other hand, wanted Harry under her eye at all times, so that she could boom out suggestions for his improvement. She delighted in comparing Harry with Dudley, which you should never ever do, regardless of who it is. And took huge pleasure in buying Dudley expensive presents while glaring at Harry, as though daring him to ask why he hadn't got a present too. She also kept throwing out dark hints about what made Harry such an unsatisfactory person. You mustn't blame yourself for the way the boys turned out, Brennan, she said over lunch on the third day. If there's something wrong on the inside, there's nothing anyone can do about it. Harry tried to concentrate on his food, but his hands shook and his face was starting to burn with anger. Remember the phone, he told himself. Think about Hogsmeade. Don't say anything. Don't fuss. Aunt Marge reached for her glass of wine. It's one of the basic rules of breeding, she said. You see it all the time with dogs. If there's something wrong with the mother, there'll be something wrong with the pup. And at that moment, the wine glass Aunt Marge was holding exploded in her hand. Shards of glass flew in every direction, and Aunt Marge sputtered and blinked, her great ruddy face dripping. Marge! Squealed Aunt Petunia. Marge, are you all right? Not to worry, grunted Aunt Marge, mopping her face with her napkin. Must have squeezed it too hard. Did the same thing that Colonel Foster's the other day. No need to fuss, Petunia. I have a very firm grip. So do I, actually. But, I don't think it's strong enough to impale a wine glass in my hand. Oh, shit. But Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon were both looking at Harry suspiciously, so he decided he'd better skip dessert and escape from the table as soon as he could. Outside in the hall, he leaned against the wall, breathing deeply. It had been a long time since he'd lost control and made something explode. He couldn't afford to let it happen again. The Hogsmeade form wasn't the only thing at stake. If he carried on like that, he'd be in trouble with the Ministry of Magic. Okay, I understand why they would be concerned about this, but they need to realize that accidents happen. They need to understand that because it would have helped Harry a lot, especially in moments like this. Hi, baby. We're joined by Mike, Darwin, Corinne, as you can see here. Harry was still an underage wizard, and he was forbidden by wizard law to do magic outside of school. His record wasn't exactly clean either. Only last summer he'd gotten an official warning that had stated quite clearly if the Ministry got wind of any more magic in Pivet Drive, Harry would face expulsion from Hogwarts. He heard the Dursleys leaving the table and hurried upstairs out of the way. Harry got through the next 3 days by forcing himself to think about his handbook of do-it-yourself room care whenever Aunt Marge started on him. This worked quite well, though it seemed to give him a glazed look because Aunt Marge started voicing the opinion that he was mentally subnormal. At long last, the final evening of March's day arrived. Aunt Petunia cooked a fancy dinner, and Uncle Vernon uncorked several bottles of wine. What makes him think they're gonna go through all that wine? Yeah, I don't know either. They got all the way through the soup and the salmon without a single mention of Harry's faults. During the lemon meringue pie, Uncle Vernon bored them all with a long talk about Grunnings, his drill-making company. Then Aunt Petunia made coffee, and Uncle Vernon brought out a bottle of brandy. Can I tempt you, Marge? Aunt Marge had already quite a lot of wine. Her huge face was very red. Just a small one, then, she chuckled. A bit more than that, and a bit more. That's the ticket. Dudley was eating his fourth slice of pie. Aunt Petunia was sipping coffee with her little finger sticking out. Harry really wanted to disappear into his bedroom, but he met Uncle Vernon's angry little eyes and knew he would have to sit it out. Ah, said Aunt Marge, smacking her lips. then putting the empty brandy glass back down. Excellent, Miss Petunia. It's normally just a triumph for me of an evening with 12 dogs to look after. She burped richly and patted her great tweed stomach. Pardon me, but I do like to see a healthy-sized bully, he went on, winking at Dudley. You'll be a proper-sized man, that is, like your father. He's have a spot more brandy, Vernon. Now this one here, she jerked her head at Harry, who felt his stomach clench. The handbook, he thought quickly. This one's got a mean, runty look about him. You get that with dogs. I had Colonel Fubster drown one last year. Brandy little thing was weak, underbred. Harry was trying to remember page 12 of his book. A charm to cure reluctant reversers. It all comes down to blood. As I was saying the other day, bad blood will out. Now I'm saying nothing against your family, Petunia. She patted Aunt Petunia's bony hand with her shovel-like one. But your sister was a bad egg. They turn up in the best of families. Then she ran off with a Reichsstraw, and here's the result right in front of us. Harry was staring at his plate, a funny ringing in his ears. Grabbed your broom firmly by the tail, he thought, but he couldn't remember what came next. Aunt Marge's voice seemed to be boring him into him like one of Uncle Vernon's drills. This Potter, said Aunt Marge, wildly seizing the brandy bottle and splashing more into her glass and over the tablecloth. You never told me what he did. Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia were looking extremely tense. Dudley had even looked up from his pie to gape at his parents. He didn't work, said Uncle Vernon with a half glance at Harry. Unemployed. As I expected, said Aunt Marge, taking a huge swig of brandy and wiping her chin on her sleeve. A no good, count for nothing, lazy scrounger who... He was not, said Harry suddenly. The table went very quiet. Harry was shaking over. He had never felt so angry in his life. More brandy! Yelled Uncle Vernon, who had gone very white. He emptied the bottle into Marge's glass. Yo, boy, he snarled at her. Go to bed. Go on. No, Vernon, hiccuped Aunt Marge, holding up a hand, her tiny bloodshot eyes fixed on Harry's. Go on, boy. Go on. Proud of your parents, are you? They go and get themselves killed in a car crash. Drunk, I expect. They didn't die in a car crash, said Harry, who found himself on his feet. They died in a car crash, you nasty little life, and left you to be a burden on a decent, hard-working relative, screamed Aunt Marge, swelling with fury. You are an insolent, ungrateful little... But Aunt Marge had suddenly stopped speaking. For a moment, it looked as though words had failed her. She seemed to be swelling with inexpressible anger. But the swelling didn't stop. Her great red face started to expand. Her tiny eyes bulged, and her mouth stretched too tightly for speech. Next second, several buttons had burst from her tweed jacket and pinned off the walls. She was inflating like a monstrous balloon. Her stomach bursting free of her tweed waistband, each of her fingers blowing up like a salami. Marge! Yelled Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia together Aunt Marge's whole body began to rise off her chair toward the ceiling. She was entirely round now, like a vast life buoy with the piggy eyes, and her hands and feet struck out weirdly as she drifted up in the air, making a pop-delective popping noises. Ripper came skittling down into the room, barking madly. Ruff, 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 ruff. No! Uncle Vernon seized one of Marge's feet and tried to pull her down again, but was almost lifted from the floor himself. A second later, Ripper leapt forward and sank his teeth into Uncle Vernon's leg. Harry tore from the dining room before anyone could stop him, heading for the cupboard under the stairs. The cupboard door burst magically as he opened it. In seconds, he had heaved his trunk to the front door. He sprinted upstairs and threw himself under the bed, wrenching up the loose floorboard, and grabbed the pillowcase full of his books and birthday presents. He wriggled out, seized Hedwig's empty cage, and dashed back downstairs to his trunk just as Uncle Vernon burst out of the dining room, his trouser leg in bloody tatters. "Come back here!" he bellowed. "Come back and put it right!" But a reckless rage had come over Harry. He kicked his trunk open, pulled out his wand, and pointed it at Uncle Vernon. "She deserved it," Harry said, breathing very fast. "She deserved what she got. You keep away from me." He fumbled behind him for the latch on the door. "I'm going," Harry said. "I've had enough." And in that very moment, he was out in the dark, quiet street, heaving his heavy trunk behind him, Hedwig's cage still under his arm. And that is the end of this inflating chapter. With this in mind, bye!